So I think we can start the discussion. Welcome to the final breakout session. Our main task is to draw some conclusions of the 2 days, what you have listened, what you have learned, what could be the next steps. So maybe someone from the Algerian side can start to comment. You are responsible for your own mics. You can open your mics and comment, join the discussion. And then in the end, we will again go back to the main room and finish the discussion all together. We do have some Estonian ICT cluster members instead of me here as well. From yesterday, for example, Tanel Keres from e-school. Tanel, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. All good.
Tanel is here, and Kevin from Cybernetica should join us shortly as well. So maybe let's start. Is there someone who wants to comment how the 2 days have been for you? Did you find something valuable? Anyone? Just some reflections.
Can I?
Yes, of course.
Hello.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yes, of course. Certainly. I mean, all the interventions were very interesting, all the presentations, and it was covering different aspects. I mean, it was very rich. Also, both on the theoretical aspect than the practical one. And I have personally appreciated all the examples presented today. It was really very enriching and interesting.
Latifa, maybe you can bring out something that was most valuable or the most interesting for you within the 2 days, or your favorite topic?
My favorite topic was the approaches, the approaches used to shape or to design the different processes. This is a very important point in implementing any government system, but also the technological choice. There is a certain pragmatism in the choice of tools, in sense that we are not obliged to have the most trendy, the most modern. We can use what we have. And this is a strong point to start any eGov project, especially if we start with small projects, and then we evaluate, we will have feedbacks that will allow us to go in more important projects with less risks, etc.
Definitely. Yes. Very good outtakes. So I agree that it's not reasonable to break what you already have, but to use the components that are there already, and make use of the existing solutions.
Especially because the technology is always progressing, and if we run after the technology, I mean, we risk to not complete any project we start. So it's better to say that I will use what is helpful and useful for implementing services. That's all.
Very good. Anyone else wants to comment? I can see many men's faces up there. Someone wants to open the mic. So, what are the main challenges for you, for example, in Algeria, in implementing the electronic solutions? No challenges? Are these technological or organizational challenges, or how do you see it?
Maybe it's Kevin from the previous session right now. So
yes, very good.
In some of the questions, I saw people asking about interoperability and X-Road. I don't know if they're here. We didn't touch upon any of those questions in that session because we had a whole section for that yesterday. But if those who had questions about it are in this session room right now as well, then maybe you can ask them here, and Katie or myself, we can help you with that as an example to kick off the conversation.
Kevin, maybe you remember some of the questions that were the most critical ones in the main room.
I'm afraid I've lost them.
I'm also interested in how does it. We have been talking about the public-private partnership a lot within the last 2 days. How is it working in practice in your country? Or is there a cooperation between the private and public sector, or rather not? On how do you see it? Any comments?
May I?
Of course, Latifa, you may.
Well, I don't want to take all the speech, so I would like to invite my colleagues to intervene too, because they are in charge of responsibilities in some institutions. I am an academician, but I have a certain experience at certain time of my life. What we can say is that in Algeria there is really a big volunteer to implement any government system. And if, for example, we look those last years, there is changes in some sectors. For example, in the sector of post telecom, there is some services implemented, even if it is a simple services, but there is changes. But now, after these 2 days, I see that maybe we should make a general overview, maybe to select the most urgent, the most important, because when I have followed the different examples presented, there is different segments related to finance, for example, related to land management, related to, so there is different needs, different segments that we could implement, and maybe we should start by the most urgent. And I personally think that collaborating with, for example, with Estonia could be very, very helpful to us to, for example, to conduct or to manage our first project. I mean, we need maybe to know more, to be more accurate to solve certain problems.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and I'm also reading the chat. There are some topics in the chat that the topic was e-government in general, but you would like to have other workshops in the future, as I understand, for example, about distance training, etc. This is definitely where Estonia could be of help, and we would definitely like to collaborate. Maybe I would like to involve Tanel here as well in that question. Maybe you want to comment a bit more.
Yes, thank you. I was just about to say some words that, yes, yesterday we had a session regarding training the citizens and how to, let's put it this way, invisibly force citizens to use electronic services. And the idea is that you can provide all the things. Basically, you can provide anything digital, but if there are no users, there is no chance that no one will actually start using it. I once made let's say an example from Tallinn city, for example, that the public transport in Tallinn is free of charge. But the thing is that you have to do some things from your side. You have to validate the driving card or the electronic card. So you can provide everything for free for citizens, but citizens have to do at least something. So that was just a trivial example. But again, if we are talking about Estonia and e-services, you can provide everything digital way, like declared taxes. It's the most commonly used example, but some other things as well. Register your car, or sell or buy a car, or whatever the thing is. Like a driving license is expired, then you can get, you just fill the form in web and that's it. But again, citizens have to have some knowledge of using these applications and then this. So the way how Estonia solved this issue was to make some good or educating citizens with different projects, and that was actually a Kickstarter for all the rest of the electronic services. If you have users, then you can provide new ones. In Estonia, we already talk about e-elections, but this is something that is going like every 4 years. And if you are just implementing one thing, it just doesn't make sense, because everyone will just forget how it worked 4 years ago. But if it's like a constant thing that you can do everything in web, use the services a digital way, you give additional services all the time, then people know how to use it, or know how to use it, and it's another way how to educate your citizens. But yes, we yesterday gave some ideas how to do it, and hopefully you find something useful from here.
Yes, I think you can also, who didn't maybe have the chance to participate yesterday, then you can, you have the links to watch the yesterday's panels as well. And the session about the digital skills actually also gives an overview of how we approached it in Estonia, as we have this comment from Smine. I'm not sure if I pronounce your name correctly, I'm sorry, but that you think that the most interesting part is the training for all citizens, and not only the ICT professionals. This is where Estonia started from the very root level, with from schools and with elderly people, to teach them to use the computer first.
And also use students and university students to be as lecturers or teachers there, and also use the school classrooms. So basically the infrastructure is probably there, but it can be used in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm. So Tarek comments in the chat that the issue now is the lack of interoperability, and the many systems are being developed but independently. The citizen has an insurance ID, a national ID, worker ID. We can see many IDs used to access a different service that has a copy of a duplicate of personal data. Tarek, maybe you want to comment, open your mic and comment the situation a bit yourself as well, and tell us about the obstacles and difficulties.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good, very well.
So on a technical level, apart from forming or training all citizens to use information technology, which will be very difficult. We have 43 million, so we are a pretty big country. On a technical level, if we see different e-government systems that are being developed, so we have many services that are actually available online, but the problem is we register every time on every service. So as a citizen, I have many accounts on different platforms using multiple application on my mobile and each and every application allow me to do one thing or to access one service. I think building a system equivalent to X roads, for example, will be the next step. So the national ID that have been cited by multiple colleagues is not really useful actually. It is linked to the biometrics parameter of the citizen, but not to services. So the next step, if we want to build X roads or to make real and powerful exchange of data, is to use the national ID in every services and on every platform.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think on the technological levels, if we speak technically. That's all.
Very good thoughts and a very good idea to start from. My question is, how many people actually are representing the private sector and how many are representing the public sector? Tarek, which are you yourself?
Personally, I'm IT teacher, assistant in university, and PhD student. So I think I represent the public sector. And I think almost everyone here represents the public sector. The private sector in Algeria, I think, is waiting for the government to do something. So we do not see real application and real investment in the IT infrastructure. So they are simple users. The private sector use the technology, yes, but it counts on the government to do everything. Once the technology is available, they start to use it as simple users. We will. I think we do not see a real application from the private sector. So I think even almost every Algerian here from the attendance is represents the public sector.
Okay. I can see in the participant list also Katrin, who presented in the morning. Katrin, maybe you want to add something to the discussion about how to actually make the private public partnership work and how to make the collaboration more successful in this sense, or to create it. Katrin, are you here?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't able to unmute myself, but now I think you can hear me. So yes, thank you. The first thing is that there is a need for some legislation. I mentioned in my intervention that often we don't need special laws, and this also may not need a special law, but it needs to have legislation in the country that enables public-private partnerships. And this is often existing, and this doesn't have to be, again, not complicated law, but it has to do with the questions of procurement and so how you involve the private sector. So that's the first thing. But I think without having a time to study it in detail, I'm pretty certain that at least some basis of such legislation does exist in Algeria. Then the next step is to allow that, for instance, for identification that I just heard a little bit of this discussion, that the same form of identification is recognized by the public and the private sector. And that is more a question of policy or strategy, that the two sides accept to work together on this and accept one another's identification, the way it was done in Estonia, which I believe others have also mentioned, that in the beginning, it was the privately developed bank identification that was used also for public services. Nowadays, most of us use our public sector identification for the private banks. And this is just a question actually of the both sides to come together and agree to do this, because it is good for everybody. It makes people more willing to use this new way of identifying themselves. And so actually this isn't so complicated, but it must be done clearly so that, and I mentioned this when I was speaking earlier, we know that this is a legally valid way of identifying ourselves, but there is absolutely no hindrance for private and public sector to agree on the same form of identification.
Thank you, Katrin. Do you have any questions or any other remarks? Maybe someone here from the government side or the IT ministry. Latifa is asking how the ICT cluster was created. Hilary is here, but I don't know if she has the mic. Hilary, can you hear us? She's from the ICT cluster, but basically the ICT cluster belongs under the IT Companies Association that was created by the companies already more than 20 years ago. Maybe someone from the Estonian side wants to add the details. I haven't been in the sector for so long.
But is it a consortium, kind of consortium, implying governmental parts and private parts, or is it just formed by a private sector initiative? I mean, what is the initiative behind the creation of the ICT cluster? What was the initiative?
Well, first of all, the initiative is to the same that we have been discussing here for quite a long already now, the private-public partnership, to be a valuable partner for, first of all, the Estonian government, as well as then there was created a separate export cluster for the exporting Estonian ICT companies. The ICT cluster itself holds private companies mainly, but also the university, for example, is a cluster member, and so on. Kevin, maybe you have, or Tanel, maybe you have something to add. Definitely, Doris is the best person to talk about the ICT cluster itself, because she's the export manager of the cluster.
Yeah, so maybe if I can just add on the topic of the ICT cluster, if that was the question, right, Katie? So
yes,
I think this started out somewhere in maybe already in the late 90s or somewhere on that, and not just as the ICT cluster, but sort of a coalition of Estonian tech companies, sort of coming together in creating sort of a suitable business environment for those companies in the country. So acting as a lobby group, but also providing know-how and knowledge transfer to each other as well, and combining forces or each other's strengths in a way. And the ICT cluster as such acts as an export-oriented body in a wider union, I'd say, and focusing largely perhaps even on e-governance topics and issues. And this was then sort of members of the bigger ICT union that came together and decided that for e-governance related topics, it would be necessary to have a dedicated sort of arm in this wider union.
Tanel, do you have something to add on here, or?
No, not actually. But what I can tell is that it definitely helps our companies to work together and then find and share information, and then some other good things come out of this cooperation. So I strongly suggest to create such a thing in Algeria as well, if you have some companies or some interest parties there. But
yeah,
nothing in addition. Yeah, thanks.
Maybe to add on that, just in Estonia, we are mainly competitors, all of the Estonian ICT companies, because we are also participating in the international tenders and so on. But in the ICT cluster, export cluster, we are as one big family trying to export the Estonian solutions and spreading the word about Estonian e-success story. So yeah. Is there anyone else who wants to maybe make some conclusions or draw some I don't know, remarks from the 2 days? Especially about what you have gained and what would now be the next steps for you, how to move on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a question about the future workshops in the chat that in the future to have maybe about distance training workshops. We have marked this down, and we would be happy to make this work. So yeah, if we don't have any other questions or any other comments, then maybe Tarek, would you be able to maybe comment in the main room with a couple of words, and maybe Latifa as well, about what we have discussed? And then we can all move back to the main room and see where the other breakup session led.
Yes, if Madam Mahdawi, but if
Great
Madam
pleasure.
Mahdawi,
Very good.
Great pleasure, Tarek, yes.
Very good.
thank you.
Okay, the link should pop here for the main room within a few minutes. So yeah, the link is in the chat, so we can move back to the main room and continue the discussion there. See you there.